until you get so desperate that you say, okay, if you ask me one more time why, I'm going to kick you out. Then we start really talking.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 274. What is the XY problem? Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darin and Viktor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darin reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Viktor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darin Pope and Viktor Farsic. Viktor, have you ever heard of the XY problem?
No idea. No idea. I don't know what you're talking about. And I don't know why am I talking with you about something I have no idea about.
Everything you just said there is the XY problem. So I have a link about the XY problem. The link is down in the episode description. It's a really simple site, xyproblem.info. Let me read it to you first, and then we'll see what you just said, see how it aligns to that. So the problem is asking about your attempted solution rather than your actual problem. So here's the story. User wants to do X. Okay, I want to drive from North Carolina to California. Okay. User doesn't know how to do X. I don't know how to drive. But they think they can fumble a way to a solution if they can just manage to do Y, fly an airplane. I want to drive to California, but if I can figure out how to fly an airplane, then I can figure out how to drive.
In other words, the question was wrong, right?
Question is wrong. Yeah. So user doesn't know how to do Y either. So user doesn't know how to fly in my case. User asks for help for flying. Others try to help with flying Y, but are confused because Y seems like a strange problem that the user wants to solve. Here's the key part to this, and really the last sentence. After much interaction and, more importantly, wasted time, it finally becomes clear that the user really wants help with X, driving, and that Y, flying, wasn't even a suitable solution for X, driving. How often in tech do we run into this?
Look, now you owe me at least a couple of sessions with the psychiatrist. Because now you made me remember all my days when I was working as a consultant, as professional services. Assuming that I understood what you just explained, I think that's depicting probably 95% of engagements I was with or in. Right? When a company calls me, hey, can you come and help? Of course I can. Okay, so what do you need help with? How can we implement XYZ, right? Without really explaining what they're trying to do, because XYZ, and I'm now not referencing the name of the problem, is not necessarily what they need.
It's not necessarily what they need, but they were, like I do, solutioning, thinking that, okay, I don't know how to do X, going back to the definition. I don't know how to do X, so maybe Y will help me, but I don't know how to do Y either. So I'm going to focus on Y, get more people involved, when I'm not really even trying to do Y, I'm really trying to do X.
Yes. But in your example, it's not about my understanding, getting to the destination with a car or getting to the destination with a plane. It's about, okay, I want to get to California or whatever you said the destination is, right? I need to be there at that day, at that time. And then we can talk about whether it's X or Y or Z or whatever it is, right?
How can we help people not go down this path? I see this come up, your case of in professional services, you show up at a client, things happen like that. But sometimes even within a company,
Maybe it's newer people. They don't know how to get around things, so they don't know how to ask the right question. What do you think we can do to help mitigate the XY problem?
I think that the major problem often is simply not knowing what the options are. I have a rough idea what I want to do. I have only one option in front of me because there is only one option I'm aware of. Not that I have really one option. I'm aware of one option. And then I want you to help me implement that option, right? So imagine in your example is actually if for whatever silly reason that person was not aware that there is existence of cars, right? You can only fly. Or let me extend your example, kind of, there is a third option, train, right? Maybe actually that's the best option because maybe you would like actually you need to be at certain place at certain time, and between now and then you need to finish your presentation. Then actually train is the best option because you have more space, you can work while you're being driven, and you have Wi-Fi available. So understanding the options is really probably the most challenging part because it takes time to know what are all the available options, right?
So understanding options is one part of it, but I also think, going back to the definition, I have a problem with X. I think Y can solve that. So I focus on Y when in reality I just need to be doing X. So let's see if we can make this a little more concrete. Let's say that my problem is I do not know how to administer a Kubernetes cluster. Let's keep it simpler. I don't know how to use kubectl. So therefore, I'm thinking I don't know how to use it. Like I don't understand how to set up kubeconfig. I don't know any of that. Fair enough. But then if I can just figure out how to go against, because I hear that Kubernetes is all API driven. So if I can just figure out how to interact with just the API, that will solve my problem. But I don't know how to do that either.
No, if you would be doing role-playing now, imagine that you stopped, and very often people would at kubectl or kubecontrol, I was told that that's the right word. Anyway, you stopped your explanation with kubecontrol, right? And you didn't tell me what you're really trying to do. So you're trying to define the state of something running in Kubernetes cluster, right? That's probably what you really want to do. But you're telling me that you don't know how to use kubectl. If you can tell me that, okay, so what are you really... Usually as a professional, when I was doing professional services, I would annoy the heck out of people, right? If you would continue role-playing, it would be, okay, so why do you want to use kubectl? Why? Why do you need it, right? And then you would answer this or that. And then I would keep asking why and why and why and why and why until we get, that's what you really want. Okay, so maybe we'll go back to kubectl. Excellent. Maybe we will go to K9S, right? Maybe kubectl is not the right choice for that. Maybe you shouldn't use any direct interaction and use Argo CD, right? We don't know, and I don't know. I cannot help you until I know what you're trying to do. Until you get so desperate that you say, okay, if you ask me one more time why, I'm going to kick you out. Then we start really talking.
So it's interesting that you brought up your whys, and I think you actually said 5 whys in your rant there. The problem, I think, with XY is if we can get to people early enough to where we can ask the whys, I think we can stave off the XY problem. I think the XY problem is somebody's been just sitting in isolation for too long, and they've had too much time to think, and they haven't reached out for help early enough. Therefore, they have dug their hole even deeper than they really probably should have.
Exactly. They accumulated depth. Not necessarily depth, but the more you have, right, the harder it is to backtrack and say, okay, maybe it's not this, maybe it's that, right? The more you have, the less options you have, which sounds contradictory, right? But if maybe Kubernetes is not a thing, maybe it should be Google Cloud Run, right? And I can suggest Google Cloud Run if you're early on in Kubernetes journey or you haven't started. If you're already running Kubernetes for 4 years, you have such investment made in it then my why from that perspective becomes irrelevant or not as relevant as it could be, right?
So how do we stop ourselves from going down the XY problem? Ask for help sooner?
I think it's by stopping whatever you're doing for a moment and think. And this is normal, right? We are all pressed with time. We all have something to deliver at some not so distant moment in the future, right? And we're all focused on how can I deliver this, right? How can I write those lines of code faster, or Go or YAML or whatever it is, right? And that rush to accomplish something usually prevents us from stopping and saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to meditate for half an hour first. And then I'm going to ignore everything I know and think of alternative ways to do it, to accomplish whatever the mission is. Assuming that I know what the mission is, and often I don't. But assuming that I know what the mission is, then yeah, you need to stop. Just kind of calm down. Think.
But isn't that part of the problem too? Because all I'm doing is thinking about the problem.
I mean, if all you're doing is thinking about the problem, then you have a different type of the problem. But that's often not the problem, right? The issue. At least not with majority of people. Majority of people are just coding, going crazy. Now, there are some typically roles, you might be systems architect, and then you think more than anything else, which is wrong as well. But I feel that for majority of people, the problem is they do less thinking. Very often even delegate the thinking to somebody else, which is just not why we're doing what we're doing.
Let's go into one of the examples that's on the page at xyproblem.info. Person wants to get the last 3 characters of a file name. What do you think they're really trying to do? So there it's like, hey, look, I just need to get the last 3 characters of a file name.
I'm having difficulty even imagining what would be the potential reason for that. If you said first three, then I could guess. Okay, give me the answer, yeah.
I just want to know what the file extension is. Right? I just want to know what the file extension is. But you know what the problem is with file extensions and just 3 characters?
It's not always 3 characters.
It's not always 3 characters.
Exactly.
So when we get, maybe the part of the problem is that we think we know what we want, so we're going after something else, the Y side of things, thinking that'll help us get to X, but then we don't tell people about it. Or are we just scared of looking stupid, I guess?
There is even worse combination, and that's that imagine there is person A who wants to get extension of a file, right? Wants it to be done, but not done by that person. Then he delegates or she delegates the work to somebody else and says, okay, you're a developer, give me last 3 letters. And that person doing it has no means or way to actually know what is the real goal, right? That sounds silly, but that happens a lot. That's what we had more in the past, I hope, than today with requirements, right? When managers and leads come up with infinite list of requirements for your application, and then you start coding requirement number 1, requirement number 2, requirement number 3, right? What that is, nobody knows. Irrelevant.
Even though it is highly relevant. Because by the time you get to requirement 20, then did the requirement 3 change?
Yes, or missing, or, kind of, let's say that, hey, maybe nobody said that the requirement is that something should be accessible to everybody, and you're not creating a web application, but some script that fulfills all those requirements. Just nobody told you that people should be accessing that, right? It's not a requirement. You don't know what it is. Perhaps shopping site, and you created a shell script that fulfills absolutely all the requirements.
Except for nobody can actually buy something from shell script.
Exactly.
But you know what you can buy? You can buy some Barbaro Mojo. Are you ready to spice up your life while you figure out how to work your way around an XY problem? Meet Barbaro Mojo, the delicious Cuban hot sauce with a kick that's sponsoring today's episode. Barbaro Mojo brings the heat with their unique Cuban marinade mojo base, adding an unforgettable flavor to your favorite dishes. With flavors like El Habanero, Halibo, Panazzo, and Best Day Ever, there's a perfect match for everyone's taste buds. As a DevOps Paradox listener, you're entitled to an exclusive 25% discount on your first order. Now, not only are these hot sauces gluten-free and vegan, but they're also perfect for spicing up your work-from-home lunches or adding an extra kick to your weekend barbecue. Trust me, you don't want to miss out on this chance to taste the best Cuban hot sauce out there. So go ahead and order your bottles of Barbaro Mojo today, and remember to use the promo code DevOps25, that's DevOps, the number 2 and the number 5, to get 25% off your first order. Thanks to Barbaro Mojo for sponsoring today's episode. So we've talked about what the problem is. We've tried to talk about, I guess, how we can solve it. Can we teach someone to not do the dumb XY problems? How can we train people to focus on what is the real problem you're trying to solve? Is it we're asking the 5 whys or the 20 whys if we have to?
I hope that the main problem is what I said before, time, because I have that silly idea in my head that most of developers are intelligent people, right? They can figure things out, right? Complicated things if needed. We just need to give people time and invite them to stop and think, right? Stop and learn. All the time, for example, Darin, right? You're talking about, hey, you might not know what the problem is. But even if you find out what the problem is, do you understand the context of all that, right? Where the problem lies? Because for all I know, maybe even the problem is not the problem. Maybe it's somewhere else, right? And I'm fully aware that there are no people who know everything about everything. So when I say, hey, to understand the context, to understand the system as a whole, I don't mean in depth and kind of, you know everything about everything, but just enough, right? There's the typical problem when we talk about applications and then they run in Kubernetes and then they scale up and down, but that's a different thing. That's not part of the context you understand, and then whatever you design is not scalable, right? It happens all the time. That's because even if you know that your problem is that the application needs to scale, you also need to understand the context of where is it going to run, how is it going to run, and so on and so forth. So time, right? And telling everybody it's okay. You're allowed to learn. And when I say learn, I don't mean learn only external things, but learn what's going on here.
I think along with the learning, we have to give people permission to ask questions early.
That's part of learning. You cannot learn if you're not asking questions. I mean, if when you were in uni, right, those who never ask questions from a professor, they never did well.
I guess that was my problem. I mean, I would ask questions sometimes, but that's not my natural default. I usually wait too late, and I fall into the XY trap because I just wait too late. I think I know what it is. I come up with, if I can just get this thing, that will get me to this. But I'm not communicating that combination of things. And I think if we allow people, you've been using the word context a lot. If we allow people in context to ask questions when they need to, don't make them feel bad when they ask a question when we think it might be too early. Because we may say, go read the effing manual, right? We might just say that. But that doesn't help somebody out that's trying to learn it. Maybe we can just say, go read the manual politely. Let's put it that way. If we can allow people to ask questions when they feel like they need to ask without feeling like a dummy, that might help people move away from the XY thinking process.
A great follow-up to a question is, that's a great question, right? That's a cliche, but that's actually an important question. That's how you, right? It's not, hey, you should know about it and stuff like that. Amazing question. Let's talk about it, right? You reward people for asking questions.
Because what would happen if you were told, you throw it at me, if you were to say, hey, that's a really stupid question, Darin, you should have read the documentation first. Guess what? There's going to be two things that happen. They may or may not happen at the same time. Number one, I'm going to feel really stupid. Number two, I might punch you.
And number three, maybe your documentation sucks.
Okay, on top of that, that could be true as well. So I'm not saying everybody needs to be warm and fuzzy and hug everything out. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying, don't act like a jerk when you're being asked questions. But then if you are the person asking the questions, try to lead with what it is that you're really trying to do. Even if you have to go circuitously, thank you very much, to get to that actual point. Because if you're coming to me, if you're coming to Victor with a question, then it's like, sometimes we don't have time for the 20 whys. But I'm okay with if you're laying out your thought process, because then I can sort of, okay, now I'm empathizing with you. I can sort of see, oh, this is where you went down the wrong path. Or maybe it's like, no, you're actually going down the right path. You're about 3 steps away from it. It's like you've seen the meme where you're digging out for gold and you come up just a few feet short. Like sometimes you got to stick with it too.
It's not a responsibility of a person whom you ask to ask why. It's kind of, hey, courtesy. I'm being nice today, right? But more often than not, you ask a question and answer the question. It's up to the person asking the question actually to ask the right one. You cannot blame people for not asking, hey, why are you asking me that?
If you're responding with, why are you asking me that? And you're, I'm going to call it management for lack of a better term. That's bad.
No, but in this context, I maybe phrased it wrong. I meant, why are you asking me that? Like, okay, I want to know what's behind it. That's why, right? It's not natural that I will not ask why. You ask, I answer. It's up to the person really to ask the right question.
And it's our job, I guess, I'm air quoting there, to make sure that we're helping lead people down that path to where they then learn that we're able to get there through questions. Is question the correct way to get to answers? That's a deep thought.
You know, usually when I was doing professional services, it really depends on the time, right? If I'm with you for an hour, you ask, I answer, that's it, right? If I'm with you for a day, then I will ask around because I have time to dig into it, right?
And if I'm there with you for a week, it's going to get even better.
Yeah, exactly. That brings me to one of my complaints when I was doing professional services. I always disliked, you know, when you do services, when you create a detailed agenda in advance. Because it's the same problem. By creating detailed agenda, we all assume that we know exactly what the problem is, what the solution is. You just need help of somebody to speed it up.
I'm going to go against you there for a second, I think.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to a detailed agenda from the beginning, but I, as the consultant, need to have the ability to pull the ripcord as soon as I see that agenda is going sideways. Now, ignoring all the legal and everything else, right? Because this is a signed contract. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, but that's the problem, right? Let's say that I come to help you with Argo CD. So it happens that you want to use Argo CD to build images. And that's the agenda, right? That's the legal contract. We're going to spend a week doing it and not get to any place simply because Argo CD is not the tool you use to build images. You should use Jenkins. But you just locked me into what you thought that you need from me, and you made it legally mandatory for me to deliver that. I feel so much more confident if you say, Okay, so I'm coming here to help you for 3 days. Shoot. Go for it.
And the agenda should be questions, not actions.
Yeah. I mean, we can discuss maybe in advance to see, maybe you need help with Perl. I haven't been using Perl for a long time, right? So maybe I'm in the wrong place. So I'm not saying, hey, you should not know anything in advance and stuff like that. But it's the whole thing about contracts in advance and things like that reminds me of why we dropped a waterfall in favor of something shorter, right? Less defined. You think you know what your application will be a year from now, exactly to the letter, every single requirement and stuff like that? That's what you're doing for the year now, for the next year? Be my guest. It's not going to work.
Especially when your company is sold and you have new leadership come in.
Yeah, because you are going to do that year of work. You're going to deliver exactly as it's written. And there is a strong chance that that's not what everybody needs. And it's quite possible that you will know that as well 3 months afterwards instead of waiting for a year. But your job is to deliver that work.
Well, you just nailed it. At month 0, we know what we're supposed to be at month 12.
Huh.
But 3 months in, we can already see, because we're doing it, it's going sideways.
Correct.
Now, unbeknownst to us, they have other things happening within the company that's going to cause that month 12 thing to be null and void, and why are we even spending 3 months on it?
Yeah, but you started the work, you finish the work, and then even if in the middle of that work you find out that that's not the right work, you finish the work because that's the work you're paid to do. And then when you're finished, we can talk about what I discovered 9 months ago. Why not?
Are you saying that we should not plan any work and we should just look at it on a day-to-day basis?
That's the other extreme that I don't like. I think that I think it's important to have a vision. But vision is very different from detailed requirements, right? Okay, so I want to be able to serve 1 million users by the end of this year, and right now we can serve 100,000, right? It's a vision, right? Or we want to be in cloud, or we want to be faster, whatever, right? You have a vision. I do not know yet how to get there. We can spend 3 months trying to figure out how to get there before we touch the keyboard. That's option number 1. And then do it for a year, because we just made, I just made 3 months of investment to figure out what the next year will be. Right? I'm not throwing away that investment. If I put my time into it, you're going to do it as well. No questions asked, right? That's very different. You do need to have a vision. We need to all know where we're going, right? Going back to the beginning of your story, we are all going to California or whatever the destination was. That's what we know. Now let's figure it out, right? Maybe we will start with a car and then realize that we should get to the train station and board the train. We don't know. We'll find out.
But we're going to California.
Yeah, exactly. That's a vision.
So what do you think? We've gone all over the place. We talked about the XY problem. I can't believe Victor brought up waterfall, but he did. Head over to the Slack workspace, look for the podcast channel, and under episode 274, leave your comments there.
We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.